Oh, you gotta do the final countdown. Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for watching. This is the Board of County Commissioners agenda setting and work session for June 18, 2019. And by way of introduction, I'm John Hutchings. This is
Gary Edwards.
Ty Menser.
Romero Chavez.
Thomasina Cooper. La Bonita Beaumont.
and on the back bench.
Robin Woods, Executive Assistant. Megan Porter, Public Information.
Welcome, Morgan. So we're going to go through the agenda for the BoCC meeting for June 25th, next Tuesday. Then we'll go through proclamations and awards, and then we'll go through the sheet if you have it from online. So starting at the top, we'll go through the agenda for next Tuesday. We'll call the meeting to order about 2 o'clock and then do the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Chair Commissioner Edwards. Approval of the agenda and meeting minutes from June 11. And then we get right into presentations, and the first one's from Public Works. We have a new employee?
Yes.
Or selection?
A new employee, Monica Gorman, who is the solid waste manager. She will introduce Bruce Rockbone. He was selected as the new fleet services manager. He was already an employee of the county. I think from my perspective, it's a great selection. Since he came to the county, he implemented a very sophisticated system as to how they need to track all the different items, equipment related to the ER&R. So he will be coming in, and then it will be an opportunity for you to welcome him into his new position.
Oh, wonderful. Mm-hmm. Questions, comments? And then with his appointment to Fleet Services Manager, are we replacing him then?
Yeah, we're in the process of finding his replacement.
Okay, very good. The next presentation is Public Works.
Yeah, I wanted to have the opportunity for Public Works. You've heard about this project. That's the Mullen Road. That's the big construction project from City of Lacey to Carpenter Road. You heard the details that it's going to take almost 2 years of construction. There is going to be a lot of disruption. Public Works has made a great effort in informing the public, coordinated with the school districts and everything else, but at the end of the day, it's going to be an impact. And I want to give the opportunity for Public Works on this setting to present the details of the project and also to inform the public as to the upcoming 2-year construction on this in this area. And later on the same agenda, you have a couple of items related to that project as well.
Yeah, I saw that. Anything?
I assume it's standard practice that they would be working with IT about disruptions to service routes and whatnot.
Yeah, we coordinate with IT, the school district, the transportation division. So all that is in place. Everybody's aware, some of the details, but along the way, we will inform them as to when we're going to be shifting lanes, or perhaps we're going to be temporarily closing portions of the road. So all that, it will be not just an initial reach out effort, but also continuing efforts as to how we need to have open communication with those stakeholders. But the citizens are going to be greatly affected, obviously. And no matter how much public outreach we do, we're going to be receiving some feedback from the citizens affected by this construction.
That notification even extends obviously to fire, law enforcement, and dispatch.
Right.
So they're continually putting that information out.
Okay.
Then move on to the opportunity for the public to address the board. Are we aware of any
I don't have any
topics?
No.
Are you, Gary? No. Anything, Tony? Okay. Takes us to agenda item number 3, the consent item A, B, C, and D. The first one is Emergency Services, Homeland Security.
Commissioner, County Manager update.
I missed you. Go ahead.
Looking back at the public testimony
did.
that you received the last meeting, you received a testimony from Ms. Dilworth that's related to issues with her particular developments. She submitted a series of questions to you the week before, and the staff is preparing a response, and we will make those responses available to you for your review before we send that answer to Ms. Dilworth. So I will not be responding on that to the level of detail, but anyways, just want to acknowledge that she provided testimony to you.
Is that it for your update?
Yeah.
I apologize for cutting you out. Now, number 3, consent items A through D. First one's Homeland Security, an MOU, or mutual aid agreement.
Yes, Commissioners, for your consideration is for you to consider authorization for the Emergency Services Director to execute a renewal of the Omnibus Region 3 Mutual Aid Agreement. As a matter of background, Thurston County Emergency Management is the coordinating agency for the Homeland Security Region 3, which includes cities, county cities and tribes from Grace Harbor, Lewis, Mason, Pacific, and Thurston counties. Homeland Security Region 3 develops this mutual aid agreement to facilitate disaster assistance and resource sharing between the regions, counties, cities, tribes, and political subdivisions. This is a renewal agreement, and really is not a dollar amount associated with this agreement. It just sets the stage as to how we can mutually cooperate in case of an emergency.
Okay, anything on that? Anything?
Is this triggered by a certain type of a disaster or a certain level of emergency?
No, it really is
Homeland Security.
to everything. For instance, from small fires, I won't say small fires, but for instance, the fire that we had last year in South County, through these agreements will help us to bring additional help. So it really is not defined by whether small or large emergencies. It's just overall emergencies that when a jurisdiction feels that they need assistance from other counties, then this agreement will allow us to do that.
So that would include natural or man-made disaster? Okay. 3B, Black Lake Regatta application.
Yeah, this is the yearly event. The Seattle Drag and Skis Springboard Association holds the race event on Black Lake between July 6th and July 7th. They have paid the $500 fee, and they have met all the different requirements, and is requesting your approval for this event.
Nope.
No problem. There's never been a problem that I'm aware of.
No? Okay. 3 Charlie, assessor has a reclassification of a position.
Before I get to the level, to this detail of this particular request, let me take you back to two of you, and maybe it's a background for you, Commissioner Menser. Back in the development of the 2019-2020 budget, you may recall that he had a position funded by the Real Estate Excise Tax Technology Fund. And that real estate, that fund was going depleting based on the projections that he provided. As a result, the board authorized to supplement some of the funding, this position, with general fund. So I have to give credit to the assessor because he's working on how he can probably find a more sustainable solution to that effort, because that fund is going to be depleted here in the next couple of years, in a way. So this proposal, what it does is he's going to be taking a vacant position of a senior appraiser and reclassifying by this action for your consideration to appraiser assistant. And what it's going to do is going to be hire an individual that is going to help to support all the different appraisal activities they do in his office. So this particular action results in the reduction from the top scale from $5,795 to $4,541. That's a savings of $1,254, or 28% reduction on a monthly basis. So this is really a good strategy as to how the county assessor is taken to address the concern of the REIT technology fund. And I recommend you strongly supporting this.
I do have a question.
I do too. Do you have questions? Go ahead, Gary.
Do we generally tell independently elected individuals or officers in this county how to run their shop to the point of classifying their employees in certain ways?
No.
Well, I guess, why are we doing this?
This is it is on his request. The office is requesting this reclassification.
And they have to have approval from the board.
Yeah. And so help me understand your question a little bit more, better.
Well, my concern is these individuals are independently elected by the citizens to do a job.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think we could micromanage, or maybe even should micromanage. I know we're overseeing the budget, but telling them exactly what positions and how much and all that, it seems like we're micromanaging a elected office, and that concerns me.
So we don't direct this action. And again, this action is requested by the assessor at his own request. And you as a legislative authority are the only authority who has the authority to have a position control. And that is not delegated to anybody, regardless if it's an elected office or not. You create a position, you change the description of a position, you change the classification of a position, and that is a legislative action that you need to take. But this is really is in response to the comments and the concerns that you had in the development of the 2018-2020 budget on the REIT, Real Estate Excise Technology Fund. He's taken actions on his own to address those concerns. So really, if I may, we're not dictating how he needs to manage his fund. It's upon his request, based on his management of this fund, that he's planning to do this.
I realize that we authorize full-time employee positions, but I didn't know that we actually would reclassify, even at his request or the authority.
Yeah.
I question whether we have the authority to tell a privately and a publicly elected individual what he can call an employee. I mean, they call him a detective, whatever the position is. Doesn't make sense to me, but.
So if I may, you're not telling them how to call it. You just approving a request
Well,
that he's
I
submitting to
realize
you.
that,
Robin.
the process.
Yeah.
Robin, go ahead, mic up, would you? Mic up, mic up. Thank you.
And again, you as legislative authority, you're the only one who can do those actions. You cannot delegate that.
So he's running his shop,
Yeah.
but a part of that, he has to get
Have we
board
been doing
approval.
this with all the elected
Yeah.
offices?
Yeah, it's a common practice from
We see reclasses all the time.
reclassification.
Well, yeah, I know we do reclasses all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of department
No,
directors.
and in fact, maybe
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, you consider reclassifications in the clerk's office. You consider reclassifications on district court.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, as of last year, you also considered reclassifications, I believe, in the sheriff's office. And the sheriff's office is working on some proposal that might be coming your way later in the year. So this is not new, if I may.
Okay.
So I'd like to go back. You have nothing?
Just, I mean, it's basically a species of a budget decision. I mean, it's
Because everything is tied to your budget.
It's similar to creating an employee. It's a budgetary impact, and that's right. I mean, I'm just,
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly.
that's the thought process behind it.
I believe so, but it's all in state law.
So in going back a year with some of the history that you started with, this position that was initially funded through the REIT,
Technology fund.
technology fund, the REIT, okay, technology fund, had a finite, it had a deadline to it, had a you've run out of money, correct?
I think the fund was depleting over time.
Right. And is this the same position that was then promoted, was offered, was given a promotion last year or the year before at a higher salary, and now we're reclassifying someone else to kind of save that position?
See, that's kind of why I'm asking the same question, because we had this, the treasurer got a bunch of this money ahead of time. The funds depleted, and then I thought the assessor went ahead and made some internal changes without our knowledge. And or authority, I didn't think we needed to do it.
Oh, that's what I meant. But at least without that piece of it, the treasurer.
The assessor has been working, is this on? There we go. The assessor's been working with me and HR to restructure his office. And one of the things he's doing is, within this fund, he's reducing the senior appraiser to an appraiser assistant. That is going to save money in the REIT fund, in the REIT technology fund. There's also money saved overall in his budget. He is taking a hard look at what his business needs are. And part of this is not with the three of you, but a prior board made an agreement with the assessor to fund a position, a lower level position, with the agreement that it would be at the higher level for a person who was in place that we wanted to retain, with the understanding that when another position within the office came open, that person would slide into the other position, and this position would be reduced to a lower level to conserve money in the fund. So he is following through on an agreement he made with the prior board.
Okay, all right. Thank you, that answers my question. It does. Anything further?
No, I mean, I'm not objecting to it. I'm just wondering if we want to get, I don't like the idea of micromanaging other elected officials is all. So.
Right, and I don't see it as micromanaging. Just, we have to adhere to law.
This is
He's running it.
your legislative duty
Yeah.
to monitor the budget and assign positions.
Budget, I completely understand. The positions, I don't know if I agree with that, but if it's the law, I guess we're going to do it and continue to do it.
All right. That takes care of 3C. Now 3D Delta, approval of the voucher list. Did you have any polls or concerns or questions about it?
I'm always concerned about the vouchers,
Yes, you are.
but I'm
Anything?
okay with it.
Not today.
Nope,
We'll
me
get it
neither.
coming in.
Okay, so that takes care of the consent items. Now we're moving into department items. Agenda item number 4, public defense, a contract with the state of Washington of public defense.
For your consideration, Commissioners, is for you to authorize the Director of Public Defense to execute a contract with the state of Washington to provide indigent dependency and termination defense legal services in the Thurston County Juvenile Court. The Washington State Office of Public Defense will contribute to the county in the amount of $159,756, which equates to just about $11,479 for attorney services and $1,834 for county-wide administrative services. In this proposal, starts on July 1st, 2019, and will go through June 30th, 2020.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that enough money to cover what he plans on doing?
I believe it does, because I believe it's a maximum of $159 on a reimbursable basis. So I believe it does, because I don't think that he has come back to ask you for any additional general fund money.
Anything on that? And my only comment is just opining that it's called indigent dependency and termination defense, but I consider that indigent defense just justice for everybody, period, rather than just indigent, because it goes into the family court and juvie as well. So I have no questions on that either. So agenda item number 5, community planning and economic development.
Yeah, for your consideration, Commissioners, is for you to authorize the Director of Community Planning, Economic Development, CPED, to increase the budget for the Boundary Review Board, which the Thurston Regional Planning Council is the organization who is, provides administrative services to that, and increases the amount from $8,000 to $17,500. As you know, we have been busy in related to some annexation proposals that have come. So it requires additional funding.
Anything on that?
I guess I questioned this before, but I mean, I guess I'm wondering about the thought process for picking this number. Because we've had one annexation, and I know we're expecting to be others, but, and then we're just gonna little more than double it. I mean, it just seems, it seems a little random. Like, how are we going about estimating the potential expenditure?
I believe at some point when we had this discussion, we went historically as to how much we have spent.
I mean, is it like an average of 2 cases a year? So and that 8,000 was covering that, and now we're expecting there's going to be 3 or 4? Or, I mean, what's the calculus that somebody's going through?
I asked that question and I got a reasonable answer, and I just can't remember what it was at the moment, but I can find that
Josh is here.
information for you.
Was it from TRPC or from CPED?
It was combination.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna hear and answer all our questions.
Yep.
it looks like, so.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Joshua Cummings, Community Planning and Economic Development Director. I have one of our SMART staff members here, Jeremy Davis, who this project has gone through a couple of different transitions over the past few years. This used to be something that we did in-house. Jeremy was the clerk of the Boundary Review Board, and so he was not able to participate in the county's perspective during an annexation process. So a couple of years ago, we transitioned the clerk position to TRPC and created some of the estimates based on historical data of what we thought that contract would be. TRPC, the staff member before, hadn't yet done any of these topics, and so we helped work through the training processes in that part. But I'll hand the mic over to Jeremy to provide a little more information on the specifics of how we got to the numbers.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeremy Davis, Community Planning and Economic Development. As Josh said, I did used to serve as clerk of the Boundary Review Board. The estimated additional funding for their contract for 2019 is a combination of working with TRPC staff to use their costs to estimate how much it would cost to process an expected number of annexations for the remainder of the year. We've also consulted with the cities in the county to try and find out and gauge how many annexations may be coming in the remainder of 2019 and what they mean, and also looking at historic trends for how these annexations have occurred. This year we did have a public hearing process for one of the annexations, which does add additional expense and time for the clerk of the Boundary Review Board. Last year we also had a hearing process, and that added expense at that time as well.
Wait for Commissioner Minzer to. So just to answer your question very specifically and directly, it's not necessarily haphazard. This is our first year setting the baseline. So we didn't really know how much it was going to cost and how many annexations were going to come through. We feel like now we have a better handle on what the expenses are going to be going forward, but we just didn't have that information previously.
Is this feeling like a heavy year, or is this feeling like this is kind of going to be our average, like that we would expect year to year?
So the goal is to engage in that annexation interlocal agreement with the cities, which would help to reduce
Because we'll have less public hearing processes.
That's the goal, yep.
And
So
more
we're learning as we
predictable.
go, but we're trying to find better ways.
Sorry,
Sorry,
be
sir.
more predictable that way.
Exactly,
perhaps.
yep. And reduction in cost.
I'll get to work on that at the TRPC.
Right on, very good. Me too.
I'm good.
And I'm good, thank you.
Thank you.
That was 5A. Now we're moving to 5B, final consideration emergency housing ordinance interim regulations.
Yeah, as a direction by the board, this is for your consideration next week. Later on your agenda, I do have an item where staff is going to be able to facilitate a further conversation with you on this particular proposal. So unless you have any particular questions, I will recommend to wait until the item later on today to have enough time for your questions to be answered, if there are any.
But this time, we'll just keep it on the agenda.
I believe that was the direction by the
Yeah.
board provided.
Okay.
Was that a 2-to-1 vote?
Yes, that was the majority of the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item number 6, Public Health and Social Services, Shellfish Protection District.
Yeah, this is for your considerations for you to consider amending the Henderson Inlet Shellfish Protection District and the Nisqually Reach Shellfish Protection District Consolidated Work Plan. There is a few elements for your consideration to add as an amendment. And Art is here to walk you through as opposed for me to give you the perspective. So.
Good morning, Art.
Good morning. So I'm Art Starry, the Environmental Health Division Director and for Thurston County Public Health and Social Services. And you may recall a few weeks ago there was a briefing about the Henderson Inlet Closure Response Plan. And that was something that Andy DeFobis and some other folks and I helped talked about. And it has to do with the Henderson Inlet shellfish downgrade that took place last year. The Department of Health downgraded 30 acres of commercial shellfish harvesting area. And so as a result of that, the county had to develop a response strategy to try to combat that downgrade. And so we reviewed the closure response plan with you, again, about a month ago. And you said that you wanted to approve the response plan. And so I reviewed that with our legal counsel, Jane Futterman, and she recommended that that you actually adopt an ordinance to amend the work plan that's associated with Henderson and Nisqually Shellfish Protection Districts as a way to officially acknowledge the work plan and basically ordain that those things should go forward. In other words, to document that. And so I worked with her to prepare the ordinance, and that's basically what it does. It just says, here's those new elements that are in the work plan that are basically focusing on on Dobbs and Fleming Creek, that those should go forward along with the education and the outreach and the other stuff that's associated in the work plan, and that they would be, approved and implemented as resources allow. So the ordinance is very clear to say it's as resources allow, because we know we don't always have the money to do everything we'd like as quickly as we'd like. So there's that note in there as well. So that's what we're asking you to do, is to basically approve the ordinance, which basically accepts the work plan.
There are 8 elements as a result of. Could you walk us through what the commissioners, what
So
those
you,
8 elements are?
You have the ordinance?
I didn't see it.
It's attached online. Yeah,
Is it in the packet?
it's attached online. So what?
Okay, so what it does is it amends the Henderson Inlet Shellfish Protection District work plan in particular. You may recall that 2 years ago, when the previous board adopted rates and charges for Henderson, we amended the work plan to acknowledge that. So what this does is it adds on to that. It adds 8 elements to the work plan. And it says, so in response to the 2018 harvest downgrade, the following elements are added to phase 3 of the work plan. So that's the latest addition to it. So we want to update the 2005 the Shellfish District work plan to include phase 2 and 3 of the work plan. So that's just a minor thing. We have this work plan that was done a number of years ago. It's several pages long. So in the next couple of years, what we want to do is update that. So working with the Shellfish Advisory Committee, we want to do that to officially incorporate these things that you're putting into the work plan today, next week if you approve this. Work to provide a dedicated, sustainable funding source for water quality improvements within the Henderson Inlet and Nisqually Shellfish Protection District. So we talked a little bit about that last time, how one of the things that has been suspended for a while is the Conservation District Assessment that dedicates funds to this. So one thing to consider in the future is that, but to look at other ways to help pay for these activities, because there's a variety of education and outreach activities that are recommended. And for the most part, other than grants, we don't, and the rates and charges for septic system stuff, we don't have a way to pay for all of them. So that's one of the recommendations. To continue to monitor water quality within Henderson Inlet and the tributaries, to work to identify causes of pollution or problems. So in particular, it mentions Dobbs and Fleming Creeks, and that's the area where the camping club is, where we're having the water quality problems which are contributing to which are largely responsible for the 30-acre downgrade. Continue to work to implement agricultural best management practices, including plans for small farms. So that's something the Conservation District would be doing, but recognizing that there are a number of activities that can contribute to the downgrades, including the one on Dobbs and Fleming. So continue to work to have resources available to work on agricultural practices. To seek funding for corrective actions needed to correct sources of water quality pollution. Work with partners to identify areas along Woodland Creek that are most impacted by stormwater runoff. And so, for instance, one of the things that you're aware of is that there were some improvements to the Tanglewild subdivision that recognized that that was a problem, and so that was one of the things that happened, and there's other areas probably like that. So to continue to do that sort of work. And then or create and implement a stewardship campaign that teaches residents how to reduce pollution from pets, septic systems, and agriculture. So we've been doing those sorts of things in the past. We want to continue to do those in the future. And by we, it means the whole community. It's not just the health department or CPED. It's working with the whole community to try to do those sorts of things. And again, all that list of things would be done as resources allow.
Okay.
I would just point out to the public that if we don't act proactively and get in front of water quality problems with things like low impact development standards and good testing, we end up with these absurdly complex bureaucratic response plans that we have to manage and deal with. And if any of what Art just said made sense to the public, I'd be surprised. But this is what their tax dollars are paying for. And it's just something that this board, I think, has an imperative to try to avoid things like this from happening. But we are where we are, and I appreciate this work, Art.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Apparently, we had a plan, but the plan didn't work, and that's why the downgrade came about.
Well, so we do have a plan, and this is just a continuation of, I guess it's like when you have a car and you maintain your car and you fix your car, that doesn't mean that you're not gonna have to fix it again or that you don't have to maintain it. So what's happened is, in the case of, we have a plan, we've been regularly working with community members to monitor septic systems. The city of Lacey and others have made expensive and vast stormwater improvements. There's been a lot of work on agricultural activities. But what happened is that we've now got some new problems. Some things have come up. In particular, there's the camping club, and it looks like we're still working on that, and that's actually something I believe we're going to be talking to you about at your planning session later this week. But it's just a continuation of what happens when, as we have growth and changes within the community. We need to continue to monitor, and then we will have problems. And so that's what's happened here, is that we've got some changes. It looks like some change of use in maybe one farm, and then also intensification of use in the camping club that's caused some water quality problems, and now we're working to resolve those. So we have a plan. It's been effective. It's been updated once. It needs to be updated again. But in the case of these sort of water quality activities, it's kind of, you never get to rest. You always have to keep working at things and monitoring and trying to identify problems and fix them as soon as you can. And that's what's happening here.
Do we have capability of identifying the source? I don't know if you call that, DNA markers. I don't know how you do it, but the camping club's been there, I think, over 50 years.
Yeah.
And the farms have been there for a long period of time. I'd like to know what's the source of the problem? Is it animal or is it the human?
It's and that's something I could spend more time with you on, but we actually have a way of going and monitoring up and down the stream and identifying where in this case it's fecal coliform or bacteria or E. coli are coming in, and you can look to say, okay, now between Station A and Station B, that's where the pollution's coming in, what sort of land use activities are there, and in this case a lot of it has to do with the RV stuff. So it's pretty clear what's going on, and now we need to figure out how to best correct that.
But we still don't know exactly.
We pretty much know.
Source?
We just have.
Are you afraid of liability or something? Is why you don't want to tell us? Or?
Well, no. I think the evidence, again, and I'll share that with you later on, is pretty clear that there's something that the camping club is a major contributor. I mean, that's true. So
I guess I don't want to blame other causes if we really know what the cause is.
But there's
Then I wanna
also some
focus
things
on that.
upstream, and we've had some difficulty being able to gain access, legal access to the property to do monitoring, to find out to what extent some activities upstream of the camping club are contributing. So we know something's coming in, the pollutant load is being added as the streams go through the camping club. So there's some work to be done upstream, but as you know, you have to have legal access in order to sample a property or to gain entry, and we don't have that yet for one site.
Are we allowed to walk up the stream? Is there some kind of ownership there that we can't
We
go up the
can
stream?
to some extent, but then, again, you're getting into some more legal stuff, but to be able to go on the property, we can go upstream, we can go down, well, in this case, it's hard to get upstream, but given the limited access to the property, and walking up the stream itself has some logistical problems.
I'm going to jump in real quick, because you keep
Go ahead.
saying, I'll tell you later. What is it you want to tell us later that you can't tell us now?
Well, Commissioner Edwards was asking about some more detail, or at least what I thought he was asking for was more details about the camping club. And so Ramiro has asked that we'd be able to talk a bit about the Dobbs Fleming Creek stuff at your planning session this week,
And
this
that
Friday.
and we have at least set aside a couple of hours to go through
And
this
so there's more
process.
details there, and I
That's
wasn't
what he
prepared
meant.
to get into
That's
that
fine.
detail today.
Okay, good.
It's a pretty
Regardless,
simple item.
regardless of what's going on upstream that we still need to do work on, what are we going to do to address the camping club?
So that's, so the good news is that we are in the midst of negotiating a final agreement with some of the Puget Sound Partnership, Denny Heck money, to actually do further planning there to try to identify what possible alternatives there are for those, there are a bunch of holding tanks and things to try to fix them, because as you're aware, what started out as a camping club and now has for many folks become their residence. And so the use is intensified, and we need to figure out, okay, how do we manage that given the site and the soils that we have there? And that takes a fair amount of work. And so that's what we're fortunate to be able to get some funding for that. Again, we hope we have a contract fairly soon that'll come back to you, that'll allow us to do work on that.
So it takes a fair amount of work, but we're actively going after the issue.
Yeah, we've been aware, not to get too far out, but one of the things that happens is the Department of Health regularly monitors the shellfish harvesting areas. They monitor it every month. And when they basically are able to start to see trends when they're going the wrong way. So for a while, we've recognized that we were in danger for the stations that are adjacent to where Dobbs Creek enters into Henderson Inlet. And so we were able to start making applications for grant funds and things, recognizing we had a problem coming our way. So we've actually been gearing up for this. Even though the downgrade happened last year, we actually started working on getting funds to do more monitoring and to do remediation almost 2 years ago. So the bad news is we've had a problem. The good news is we're working really hard to get the resources to address it and to help the community out there, because as you know, a lot of those folks have very limited means, and if we get into expensive repairs, that's likely going to make some tough choices for them. So we're trying to figure out how to provide some resources to help them and to address the problem.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I guess
Do you have anything else?
we still have access to that assist on septic systems, some kind of financial.
Yeah, so Craft 3, that's available. That's a low-interest loan program that we are partners with. That's actually administered by, it's administered by Craft 3, a credit union. And then in addition to that, we've applied for a couple of grants to get funding in it to actually help do engineering work and whatnot to evaluate options for that site. So that's I guess a bonus that we've been trying to resolve or trying to pull together, and it's just taking the time to get the contracts done.
Okay.
I have one more question. The scrutiny and all the hard work you just described to work on this, is this because this is a shellfish area? I mean, if we were to go to our other inlets, are they in the same state of repair, or is this one just getting attention because of the shellfish issues, or is there something particularly?
I would say that the shellfish harvesting status is the big driver, because And it wouldn't make any difference if it was Henderson or Eld. When there's a shellfish downgrade, the county's obligated to adopt a response strategy. So that really is the key to this. Now, in the case of Henderson, it's also an area where we've got other programs. Now, if we found a problem elsewhere in the county, we would work on it, but it wouldn't. The fact of the matter is that it's the Department of Health monitoring, or having that regular monitoring, that's providing the data that's triggering the action. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, because to me, that area doesn't seem, from my just layperson's understanding, is not, I mean, I don't think people think of Johnson Point as heavily urbanized, or, you know, it's very rural, it's very, you know, and if we're having those kind of problems there, I'm just wondering where that puts us in Taunton and Eld and.
There could be other problems. Again, this was triggered by the shellfish downgrade, but as a matter of fact, we don't have the resources to do this sort of intensive surface water monitoring that we would like. So there could be, I guess, to maybe feed fears a little bit, there could be some streams that are having problems and we wouldn't know them because we don't have the resources to monitor. In this case, we're trying to develop those resources. We've got some funding to do something called pollution identification and correction, but it's a small amount of money. But it's, you know, it's not ideal, I don't think.
That's it? All right, thank you, Art.
Well, thank you.
Agenda item number,
Be ready for all these questions.
agenda item number 7, Emergency Services EMS contract.
Yeah, for your consideration, Commissioners, this is an amendment number 2 to the current local EMS contract. And the purpose of this amendment is to increase the cost per square foot for the lease spaces in the Tumwater, Olympia, Lacey, and Lacey Fire Departments. The increase on the lease goes from $15.75 per square foot to $16.67 per square foot. So an overall increase on a yearly basis of $7,798. And this is going to be covered by Medic One Fund.
Okay, anything?
Kind of just the cost of doing business.
And this has not been, the increases have not been revised since 2007. So.
Oh, good grief. Okay, that takes care of 7A. 7B, approval of a contract with Olympia Emergency Services.
Yeah, for your consideration is to extend the existing contract that we have with the Olympia Emergency Services Professional, which provides, that's where the medical program director is provide the services to the county. And this proposal is to extend the existing contract from September 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2020. And also, the director is asking to authorize increases no more than 10% or equals to $40,000, and then in case some of the additional salaries are increased down the road. And I believe you have met is Dr. Fonello, who provides those services. And Kurt is here to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that money comes from?
Medic One.
Okay.
Have any questions?
Go ahead if you.
No, that was my question, just where the dollars are going to come from.
I think I'm good.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. Agenda item number 7, we're jumping to Public Works now. Approval of project prospectus.
Yeah, item 8A and 8B are related to the presentation we'll be receiving on Mullen Road. Item 8A is to authorize the department director to enter into what we call a local agency agreement to obligate construction dollars in the order of $2 million of federal funding. That is a requirement. The county needs to have this agreement with the state in order for us to access the federal monies. As a matter of background, Mullen Road improvements will go from Lacey city limits to Carpenter Road. The total construction cost of this project is $11,137,000. Where this particular proposal get access to a federal grant, the Surface Transportation Program, for $2 million. We also have the Transportation Improvement Board grant for $4,209,000. The City of Lacey is contributing towards this project $2,665,000. And the county, out of the road fund, contributes $2,262,000, and that is included on the current budget. But again, this item is solely to authorize the getting into an interlocal agreement with the state to access the federal grant for the construction of this project.
Okay, any questions? No. Questions? Nope. That was A, and how about questions on B?
Item 8B is for the same project. In this case, staff is requesting for you to authorize to issuing call for bids to secure a contractor for this project.
Anything?
And the construction
Let's see
season
what
is
it is.
expected to begin at the end of 2019, and it will carry for just about 2 years.
Well, that's coming up.
Yeah.
Okay. Good, thank you. Agenda item number 9, Central Services, bid award for triage restroom repair.
Yeah, for your consideration, Commissioner, is for you to authorize awarding a contract to Able General Contractor of Lakewood, Washington, to provide services to the triage facility, and particularly related to fix some water damage on the existing floor of the bathrooms in that triage facility. And also there has been a little bit of I would say misuse of that bathroom as well by some of the clients. So it's a combination of water damage as well as physical damage that we need to address in that.
So it's mostly vandalism or human cause?
I don't want to call vandalism. It's just part of providing services to those individuals who uses that facility.
So it's malicious mischief? But it's human caused?
Yeah,
Not
and as
by
a result
design.
of that, a water line was broke, which created the water damage, and now here we are, and we're going to fix it.
Okay. Comments or questions on the bathroom
Yeah,
repair?
what budget is that coming out of?
This comes from building reserves.
Is that out of current expense then?
No.
That's-
I'm sorry.
It's not out of current expense?
No, it's the building reserve. So each building has a reserve to really address these specific items when the time comes.
Was that current expense money that went into
That
that
went in.
Yes.
budget?
Yeah.
No.
Well, a combination of, yeah.
No. No, it was not. The money collected from the triage center that's from the BHO.
Oh, yeah, it's a little bit different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard you use the term slush fund in the past.
I didn't say that.
This is not coming from a flush fund. Right. Do you have any questions or comments on
I'm
this,
just watching where it's coming.
Mr. Menser?
It just came up like months ago. I'm surprised that they were able to.
It's taken a while.
It's taken a while, and
Yeah.
I'm surprised in a bathroom you'd think that would be
Pretty crucial.
they would get repaired.
Yeah, we needed to go through the procurement process.
It's taking us time to work its way through. Yeah. Anything else on that one? I think we're beating that one up. Okay, we're done. Number 10 on the agenda is the county manager. And
Yeah,
we
I'll-
discuss our stuff.
Yeah, and I will walk you through your upcoming
Into the,
joint schedule.
And then we adjourn, and then we go right into a public hearing, Public Health and Social Services hearing.
Yeah, this public hearing, you will hear public testimony related to the 2019 Housing and Urban Development Action Plan. And along that plan, there's many funds, including the Home Investment Partnership Program, the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG. And the annual plan identifies $1,227,222 in CDBG funding, And as you may recall, that distribution was on South County, including the cities, as well as the county, including 2 potential parks in the Rochester area. And also includes $785,443 in home funding, for a total of $2,012,665 for 2019 program year. And Tom is here to answer any particular questions you may have before the public hearing.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
In this particular case, we're talking about 10% overruns potential. Is that right?
Yeah, the motion is for your consideration to approve the plan, as well as an additional 10% of overruns in terms of duration and amount.
You want to know where that 10% is going to come from?
That's what I'm wondering.
It comes from the same funding sources.
Yeah.
Okay, if we don't have any overruns, will that mean that there's going to be a little excess money to maybe enhance a project?
If I may, for instance, on the CDBG money, if the allocations there have been given to the cities of Yelm, Bucota, and Tenino, as well as the county, and for whatever reasons those projects had not materialized, they weren't able to expend those dollars, that money goes back to the same group for a further conversation as to how that money can be redistributed. And that has been the process.
So we will have, possibly, if nobody goes over budget, we'll automatically have 10% in there to do something with?
No, this is
I'm just wondering where the 10%, we allocated a certain amount. So we didn't allocate that amount plus 10%. That's what I'm wondering about.
No, this is just in the event there's any overruns. The 10% is really to give, avoid coming back to you if there's additional expenditures and the funding is in the revenues is available, avoiding to come back to you for an additional authorization to go beyond the allocated amount.
I'm just looking at the reserve pot as to how much is in it. That's all I'm looking at. That's what I'm trying
I
to
don't think
get
there
to.
is
There's
any.
not.
There's not.
So we're authorizing something, but we have nothing to back that
Or
authorization up with?
You are authorizing the full amount of the revenue from HUD and CDBG to be spent. So, I think that your question, where would the additional 10% come from?
Yes.
Is an excellent question. Because one would assume that that would mean that we were receiving more CDBG than is anticipated in this plan.
So go ahead.
Sure. So Tom Webster, Public Health and Social Services. It's correct, we are allocating the full 100%, so we don't anticipate getting any additional revenue to allocate. There are times when, for example, a project may underspend, and then we as Ramiro said, we may go back to the group and reallocate those funds to a different project. That happened in 2016. Habitat for Humanity had a proposed project to do housing rehab in the South County. That project didn't happen. We came back, and then we gave a little bit extra of that money to Bucota for their water lines project. So we amended their contract without coming back to you for approval because it was within that 10% authority. So it was a real allocation of funds within the larger pot of CDBG funds.
And, okay, I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. So we won't have any say about where that potential 10% could be spent. And that's where I think the board ought to get to set the priority, have a discussion amongst the board and set the priority. Now, I know the dollar amount makes some difference there. I'm obviously looking to have some funding for a Boys and Girls Club activity.
It will come back to you.
It will.
Yeah,
Okay.
because if for instance, if the project's allocation changes, as happened in 2016, that recommendation came back to you to endorse that recommendation of adding additional funding. But I think is mainly on this 10% is also for the duration of the contracts. That allows a little more flexibility to be within that context. But if you If you feel uncomfortable in providing 10% of on the dollar amount, we can certainly take that out and just have a 10% on the schedule, on the duration of the contract.
To me, that's not the issue. I'm not worried about the 10% per se. And I'm just trying to figure out how it all flows, where the money's at, where the priorities are set.
And if I made on the Boys and Girls Club for Yelm, for
Yes,
instance,
that's good,
the
'cause that's a
mayor,
brand-new club.
Yeah, the mayor of Yelm is the representative from the group who represents the
So he
interest.
will be able to kind of
He,
be the watchdog.
as he has made a logical argument for, I believe, $30,000 this year.
I thought
for
we
Boys
had,
and Girls
I
Club.
thought part of our overall scheme was an agreement that extra money would go to the Boys and Girls Club. Wasn't that part of the deal?
I don't know that we actually made that
Well,
decision. We talked about it.
You talked about that, and I think it was somewhat of an understanding also by the
Okay, so
mayors.
it'd be sort of an informal
Yeah,
understanding.
certainly the county will facilitate that conversation.
Okay.
And,
enough.
and the mayors certainly will make their statements very clear at those meetings as they have in the past.
Okay.
So my question is, you done? My question is, we have the CDBG money, we have the total, and a chunk goes to Yelm, a chunk is awarded to Tenino and Bucota and the county for Rochester, correct? And so if we fully do what we're going to do in Rochester, Yelm uses all their money, Bucota uses all their money, but Tenino, they're going over budget if they do. This is just for the sake of argument. Do they eat the additional costs then? Or is that part of that 10% going over?
Well, if there is additional funding, we can explore that, but if they go over budget
But
on
if
their
there's not-
project, it will be on their own.
They're on their own?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
There is, that is really, it's not predicated on the county or this funding any overruns. Each jurisdiction responsible for that, same as the county.
Same as the county, same as everybody, right? Any jurisdiction awarded.
But again, if you feel uncomfortable with the dollar amount, we can eliminate that from the motion and just have
I don't.
the extension of the,
I don't feel
on the
uncomfortable.
schedule.
It's not, we wouldn't be changing the dollar amount, it'd be at 10%. Is that the thing? Yeah.
So I would suggest taking the 10% out because.
It's a finite number.
It is a finite amount of money they have to spend. They know exactly how much it is. The feds aren't going to spend more. So why would you approve them to increase the total amount by 10%?
Okay, I mean,
Well, I thought it was project by project, so if Bucota underran, then they could spend up to 10% more on Yelm without having to come back to us, is the thought.
That's what I
But
understood.
you just expressed a desire, or at least one of you just expressed a desire that if there was money to move, you wanted to know that and have some input on
Well,
where it's moved to.
it sounds like we've kind of got that figured out, I think. And that's where I was going with all that. Where the money is, what happens if there's extra money, where does it come from? If there is money left over, and we've had that discussion amongst us, and so I'm okay with this whole proposal as long as we're still on track.
Let's work on the language on
Yeah,
this.
but, you know, once in a while, it's 25%, and sometimes it's 10%, sometimes it's 15%,
So
so.
we have addressed that in the new procurement policy. You have set a standard amount of 10%. You should no longer see
Oh, okay.
20 or 15, or it is 10% now by county policy. And we specifically put that in the policy to address that very thing.
Okay, good enough. Well, then let's just leave it there. Good.
So if we were going to change contract language for that 10%, not the 10% total, but of the dollar amount, since it's a finite number of dollars we're dealing with, should it be spelled out, though, if some jurisdiction under budgets, underspends, that's where the 10% comes from? You were suggesting maybe changing the language.
I would suggest to you the Ramiro and
Well, we're
yeah,
working-
that we can work on how it ought to read.
That,
So that it's clear.
additional information maybe create more confusion.
Yeah.
At this point, really, even you don't feel comfortable. Maybe just taking the 10% of the dollar amount is going to be probably the best approach. Because if you don't feel comfortable, you have a lot of questions.
I
We
know,
suggest
mine are
go with
answered, my
10%.
questions.
And,
I'm not uncomfortable, and
I get it. I think
Yeah.
it was helpful to know that there isn't some extra reserve
Yeah,
fund for that
there's
10%.
not.
It has to come from the various projects within the pot of money.
That's where
I appreciate that understanding, but now that I understand that, it's,
and how many years have we been doing CDBG?
We started as an entitlement community in 2013.
2013, and that 10% or whatever amount's always been built in to the wording in the motion?
Yeah, it's been 10% or some other, it might have been 15%.
Not
somewhere.
always,
but-
not always.
But has it
no.
ever bit us? Has it ever bit the county where, oh my gosh, there's a finite number of dollars, now somebody's overspent, some jurisdiction in South County is overspent? Has that ever been an issue?
Not that I'm aware of. There's certainly, I mean, jurisdictions or projects know that this is the contract value that they have, and if costs increase, that they need to come up with that additional money. So I don't think not that I'm aware of, I've been here since 2016, that
Okay.
we've had a CDBG grantee come back and ask us for more money
Okay.
when we didn't have more money to give them.
So I'm not uncomfortable with it.
No.
If they were going to readjust with what they have. Okay. So leave it as is?
I'm okay.
Leave it as is, leave it as is.
Somebody wants to do something different.
Okay,
And that, again, for the public, that was the public hearing for next Tuesday, the 25th, at 3 p.m.
And I will review the motion to give us an opportunity to make it a little bit clearer. Because in here it does state the sub-recipient contracts and amendments that do not exceed the 10%. So it talks about the sub-recipients. It gives the flexibility.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay, then we're moving on to proclamations and awards. Thank you, Tom. La Bonita, Bomar.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have one proclamation, I have two proclamations scheduled for your list. You have three on there. I've kind of gone out for July and August. There are no more proclamations for June. I've been working with Mary Ann Clear, the Director of Pretrial Services, for her pretrial and probation week. You have the draft proclamation in your packet. So as soon as we can get that finalized, I'll have it signed and be ready for that particular one in July. The next two, National Farmers Market Week. I am working with the Ashley McBee, the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Olympia Farmers Market, and I don't have a draft for that one as of yet. That's in August. And of course, the National Preparedness Month, Vivian Eason, for working with Public Works and Emergency Services. We are working on that, and that's an annual proclamation, and I don't have a draft as of yet on that.
That's funny. It's emergency preparedness, and we're not ready with the proclamation. That's just ironic.
Well, we're half ready.
Any questions or comments on proclamations?
And for your review, I believe Commissioner Messer wanted to read the language of the pretrial services is on the back side. I don't know if you'd like to review that right now, or maybe.
I looked at it. You gave it to me earlier, so I appreciate it. I'm just curious what it was about, and I guess it tracks a national week. Have we had this one before, or is this new?
No, we have had this before.
That's when you asked, it seemed kind of we were celebrating people being on probation.
Well, I just wasn't sure what the.
Yeah.
But it's about the workers.
So it makes sense then,
Yes.
okay.
On the last whereas, number 7, the 7th one before,
Yes.
it says pretrial and probation professionals are a true force, capital F, for quote, capital P positive, capital C change. Is that is that a thing that I don't understand? Why is it capitalized?
I have a call into Mary Ann to figure that out, if that
Okay.
is the theme for this year or what
Oh, like
the
maybe that's
reasoning
the
why.
maybe that's the
Yes.
okay.
So I'm have a question in.
Okay.
So I haven't read this yet, and I'm not going to take time to do that now,
Okay,
because it's still
so
a
that's
month
fine.
away.
Yes.
But we just provide feedback to you?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. That's proclamations. Anything regarding awards? Always has advisory. No, any awards or none? Okay. And boards, advisory boards and commissions.
Up first is Storm and Surface Water Advisory Board. You have reviewed Jacqueline Simmons' application. I have a new application from Paula Holroyd for that same board. Paula lives in Commissioner District 3. Our current vacancy for this particular board is for a Commissioner District 1 and a Commissioner District 3.
Wasn't there some shifting we were looking at
Yes.
for Ms. Simmons?
That is correct, and I have yet to hear back from the staff of that particular board. They're going to be meeting with their chair and vice chair regarding on the rearrangement for Jacqueline to be able to fit into a member at large and move one of the member at large people into an actual commissioner district. But I have not received an answer from staff.
So what do you need from us on these today?
You have not had the opportunity to review Paula Holroyd, so I would just have to do that review.
Got it.
Making a decision on that at a later time.
The other application here, Michelle, that's for the advisor, the
Area.
aging?
Yes,
Agency on Aging, okay.
and that just came in, and there is a little bit more detail in an attachment to the application for your review. And again, that just came in. You haven't had time to go through it. It's just to
Okay.
be brought to your attention and then make a
Talk
decision
about
at
it
a
next
later
week.
date.
Okay.
So Jacqueline Simmons is done,
Yes.
and Paula Holroyd is done, or is that something we're considering now?
No, Paula Holroyd and Jacqueline are both still under consideration by you. Paula
Oh.
Holroyd's application just came in late last week.
Okay.
And I'm waiting on staff to give us an answer on what they're gonna do with Jacqueline's
Or Jacqueline?
shuffling.
Okay.
So it still needs a formal action by the
Yes.
board.
Okay, and is Paula Holroyd someone you recruited?
No,
You
but
know
I
her?
do know
You know
her
her?
just because she's in the League of Women Voters. She was part of that water series. She shows up at things, like she shows up at the Chehalis Basin Partnership meetings, and she showed up. I did a speaking on a panel at Evergreen for a class on local government response to environmental issues, and she was there just observing. So I know she's an active citizen, but I didn't recruit her.
Okay.
I assume she's got interest in this area.
Are you good with it?
Yeah.
Because it's your commission district.
Yeah, no, I think since we've been trying to fill that spot, I mean, I think she's definitely a committed citizen, and so I don't have any problem with that.
Okay. So you need thumbs ups now?
Well, and I think for Paula, we can probably bring this item for your attention, but it still needs to be resolved, Ms. Simmons, since she is on District 2. We do not have a vacancy in District 2, but we do have a large. So the
Shift.
committee needs to have that conversation first, so we'll bring that decision to you.
Bring it all together then.
Yeah, so if you like, we can bring all together, or we can probably bring next week Ms. Paula Holroyd for your appointment. Really, is your decision.
And I'm okay with Paula, but is there a reason to rush it, or just want to do it at the same time? What would you like to do?
I'm
We
good
can,
with it.
either way, I mean, it's no big deal to put on that if we're in agreement. Ms. Simmons, I think we all liked her. We just had a question of
Have to
whether we
figure
could
out a way to
put her
decide.
slot.
The board's got to figure that out, right?
Maybe, let's
Not
go
this
ahead,
board.
if you don't mind, just bringing the formal appointment for Mr. Holroyd next week.
Okay.
And then we'll wait until the feedback from the committee on Ms. Simmons.
And then we'll talk about Ms. Horaney next week.
Yes.
Okay.
And do you know Michelle for the Area Agency on Aging?
It's not ringing a bell. That's what I'm looking at it right now.
A principal? Is this one that has, she says Commissioner District 3, is this one that needs to be by district?
No.
No, okay.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Okay.
We'll bring this.
So let's
matter-
look at this.
Yeah, we'll bring this
Yeah.
matter again for your
And
attention
I'll
next
ask
Tuesday.
over there
Yeah.
at,
Have the opportunity for you to
AAA.
review the application, yeah.
Thank you. Anything else on commissions? Nope, that's it?
That's it.
Thank you, Law. PIO check-in. Turn to Megan Porter.
Commissioners, Megan Porter, Supervisor. Just wanted to let you know, there was a video that was released by a local blogger about the courthouse project. I'm gonna be working on some FAQs to address some of the issues that were brought up in that video and adding those to the FAQs that are currently on the website. So that will be coming, I'll give you an update next week on where that's at. We finalized with the Yelm School District to have the off-site BoCC meeting on August 27th at 5:30 PM at the Yelm Middle School Commons. So that will be taking place at that time at that location. We'll begin advertising this in July with putting some flyers in the area. We're also going to be presenting it to Steady, handing out some flyers there to see if the Steady participants will put them in their area. Steady is the South Thurston Economic Development Initiative group. And then we'll also be posting to social media. A news release will go out in early August. We'll get closer to the event to get some news coverage on that. And then lastly, we are working on getting some UAS, which is unmanned aircraft system, I think. Some footage of the courthouse. That's going to be taking place this Friday morning. We're going to have one that's just going to kind of be capturing a little bit of how the traffic flows in and out. They will be following all FAA restrictions on privacy and things like that. So we're not surveillancing in any way. We're just trying to get a view of how the traffic flows in and out. And then either this Sunday or next Saturday, we'll have another UAS flight where they're going to be mapping the actual courthouse campus. And so we're doing that at a time where there's not individuals that will be walking in the area because it's a much more, apparently you can't hear me. Sorry, I just got.
Oh, no.
You can't hear me.
Okay. Please stand by.
I have to repeat everything again.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat everything. Can you hear me now, Vicki? Okay, so back to the beginning. There was recently a blogger posted a video about the courthouse project. You still can't hear me, Vicki.
Here, use one of these things.
Yeah, how, we'll use one of these. That's bizarre.
Now you can hear me. So apparently you can hear me now. All right, I'll start again. So this week there was a video posted by a local blogger that was about the courthouse. I'm going to be working on some FAQs to address some of the issues that were brought up in that video. They will be added to the FAQs on the website. I will update you next week on where that's at. We have confirmed August 27th, 5:30 p.m. at the Yelm Middle School Commons is where we're going to hold the next offsite BoCC meeting. We'll begin advertising that in July with flyers in the area, as well as providing some flyers to the study group, which is the South Thurston Economic Development Initiative. They will give them some flyers and let them know about the event so they can start spreading the news in their communities. And then we will be posting to social media at that time as well. We'll do a news release early August to hopefully get some news coverage on that so that we can get some more participants out there for our next off-site meeting. And then lastly, we are going to be having some UAS, which is an unmanned aircraft system, footage being filmed this Friday morning. This is all weather dependent, mind you. This Friday morning to get some images of how the traffic flows in and out of the current courthouse campus. They'll be following all FAA rules for privacy and all of that. So we won't be doing any surveillance. It's going to be high enough that individuals won't be able to be identified. And so it'll just be really just showing the traffic flow and a little bit of how the campus is laid out. And then either this Sunday afternoon or next Saturday midday, there'll be another flight where they're going to be doing some 2D mapping, which makes it so that you can zoom in to like a 1-inch by 1-inch area. So that's why we're doing it on the weekend, is to make sure that there's no people in the area, so we can't identify anyone in any of the images. That's going to be mapping out the whole courthouse campus, parking areas, so that we can show the different buildings and the roofs and all those things. So that will be happening. Just want to make sure the public's aware of that, and that the leadership here is aware of that.
And that is using equipment the sheriff's office and public works
Yes.
already own, right?
Yes, yeah, so it's equipment and pilots from the sheriff's office and public works.
I appreciate the fact you're minimizing the perceived intrusion the public
Yes.
may have, to include faces of people driving and/or license plates.
Yeah, none of that will be included, especially in the parking one. He's going to have it at an angle that really just shows the cars and how they come in and out, and it's going to be at a height that nobody would be identified
Okay.
if anyone's in the
On
video.
any of the PIO
No.
stuff, anything? I have a question regarding the FAQ that you'll be doing, the video. How soon will that come out? And the reason I ask is because with a tremendous amount of misinformation and disinformation, it's important to get the facts out and not let the legend become a fact.
I'm hoping to have them all addressed, send it through legal by the end of this week, and up
Okay.
on the
Is there anything
website.
we hadn't heard before? Kind of the same
Not really.
themes.
It's very similar themes to what
Yeah.
we've heard before.
But if the
Yeah.
mantra's repeated,
Exactly.
yeah. And I want to give Brian Dominique kudos for the civility series that he and I have been working on. He's done an excellent
Yes.
job. Very
Yes,
good
and
job.
that will be coming out the next month.
In August.
July. Oh, in
It
August.
plays in August, but we'll do in the adverts.
Promoting in July and playing in August, yes.
Yeah.
So look forward to that. It's a series of discussions that Commissioner Hutchings is having on civility. And so it'll be a multi-part series, so it'll be very interesting.
So that's what I would pass on, is he's done a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Anything
I
else
know.
for PIO? Anything? Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
So that takes us to the public hearings, decisions pending, but it's about 10:20. I think let's take a break, being compassionate with everybody here.
Because we need to set up a little bit of interactive
Okay,
exercise
so
with you.
10 minutes, 10:20. Let's be back at 10:30. 10:30, we'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
office, I think.
Welcome back. It is still June 18th, 2019, and we're continuing on with our work session, and we're now going into internal service rates, budget stuff.
Yeah, Commissioners, you've received a couple of briefings where staff provided you with some information related to internal services rates, and that included central services, information technology, the unemployment fund, benefits administration fund, and risk management fund. Each of those, they have a little bit of adjustment, positive and negative, and some has impacts on the general fund, as the internal services are distributed between general fund and other funds across the county. And Robin Campbell is going to walk you through as to the potential impacts of those decisions they might be considered making. The direction that we would like to have from the board is to, if you feel comfortable with those rates, those will be included on the upcoming major budget adjustment,
Yep.
midterm adjustment for 2020.
Okay.
Okay, so we are reviewing the internal service rates. And again, what those are, that's the infrastructure of county government, if you will. So it's things like our benefits administration, our risk pool, our maintenance of our facilities, our computers and the systems that we run on the computers, mail delivery, small things like that that no business could run without and government can't run without. So in order to provide a service, you have to have these functions. And in the county, we centralize them to have cost efficiencies. So we centralize the service and then we bill out the amount or divide it out amongst all the funds. So what you're approving here, or what we're asking you to approve, is the rate that's billed out to every office and department across all funds to purchase this type of service. The Central Services and Human Resources have calculated their rates based on current level of service, or maintenance level is what we call it. And what that means is they've calculated the cost to continue doing business with the same number of FTEs at the same level of service. Nothing more, nothing less. But costs do go up and down over time. So they've calculated how much will it cost to continue what we're doing today. The document that I've given you is the interactive graph, and we're going to look at it on the screen. So you've got two views. The first page, a big one in the left-hand corner, it says without, and that is without the rate adjustments. And on the other page, it's with the rate adjustments. But without the rate adjustments, the graph reflects what you have approved in the first amendment to the 2019-2020 budget. And what we're talking today is part one, if you will, of the midterm adjustments, where offices and departments will come to you and say what it will take to pay for all of our things through 2020. So without any midterm adjustment and reflecting the first amendment of the year, you have a projected ending fund balance in 2019, that's this first dark bar, of $13,141,000, rounded. And in 2020, projected ending fund balance of $14,343,000. And then it just goes up from there. That would be with absolutely no change to the budget for 2020. However, the first thing we're going to put in the graph is
Just one question.
Yes.
The ending fund balance for 2019 already includes the first quarter budget amendment decisions the board approved?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. This graph includes all of the budget amendments.
okay.
It's already in.
What did you say the ending fund balance was for 2020 projected?
with
14.
absolutely no change whatsoever would be 14 million.
How come it shows 11?
No, you're on page 2.
You're on
Still
page 2.
one.
You look at
Oh, okay,
the
got it,
without.
got it, okay.
Right, with no change, you'd be
Okay.
at 14 million.
Got it.
Okay, but recall our conversation as you contemplated the first quarter budget amendment, or the first amendment, that we have union contracts that allow for a cost of living adjustment, and we know that the CPI is 2.4%. So the first thing I'm going to enter in is an assumed 2.4% set aside in the event you should approve a cost of living adjustment. That brings your fund balance down pretty substantially in 2020. So really you don't have 14 million available. If you consider a COLA, then there's really a little less than 13 million available, because for every percent in the general fund is roughly $500,000. Every percent of a cost of living increase in the general fund is about $500,000. Okay, so that is the first thing we put in. Then on the page 2, I've added all of the adjustments to the rates that you saw in your briefings. So you recall that the cost for risk management is going up substantially. And what Tammy Devlin told us is that she will most likely come in for a rate increase in 2019 of $397,000. And the rate adjustment that she needs for 2020 is 800, and I'm looking for the precise number that I should have right here. It is $888,000 for 2020, and that is the impact of an increase in rates for our risk pool, an increase that is driven by industry rates nationwide. It's not just Thurston County where risk rates are going up substantially. And it's also driven by the fact that we have the ending fund balance right about where it needs to be for 80% confidence of the actuary plus $1 million in reserve for our deductible. So to enter the impact on the general fund, which is roughly 60%, the general fund impact for risk is $237,000. And in 2020, $533,000. That's the general fund share. Any questions about risk management?
No, I'm glad you said the rates isn't just exclusive to Thurston County, not only nationally, but all the other applicable counties in the state of Washington
Right.
are seeing this increase as well.
That's right. That is the major driving factor. That and the fact that we had been billing out, if you will, the cost of the risk pool at 82%, and we need to start billing it out at 100%. Okay. Anything else about risk?
I do have a question. Why were we billing 82% all along instead of 100%?
Because we had too much money in the risk fund. We had well over that 80% confidence plus $1 million. So we were burning down, if you will, the fund balance, purposefully spending it down. Well, we've spent it down now, and so we need to start billing out at 100%. All right, moving to central services. Maintenance and operations are the general part of central services. That's the M&O in facilities, mail delivery, records retention. I'm sure I'm missing something, but those are the major parts of central services maintenance and operations. And between the calculation of future costs and the reconciliation of the rates, and you may recall that the state of Washington laws say that no internal service fund can make a profit. So when this, for central services, I'm going to step back a moment, there's two ways to bill out central service costs. You can either do them prospectively by calculating what you think you're going to spend next year and base your rates on your estimates. And if you do that, then after the fact, you have to reconcile, did you collect more or less than you really spent? Central services collected more. The other way is on a retrospective basis, which is what we do in ER&R, where you look back and you say, my actual costs last year were X, let's say $1 million, and you bill that out in the coming year, so there's a 2-year lag between what you actually spent and when you get a bill. So we do both ways depending on which fund we're doing. Central Services M&O is a prospective rate, so they do the reconciliation, and that helps to bring the cost in the budget down. So we are actually going to bill out less than had been budgeted in 2020 for Central Services M&O by $345,000 roughly. 281. They got pretty precise with their rates in Central Services.
Can I back up just real quick and ask, I see at the top of this expenditures line item, reversions of 3%, which is fairly conservative, isn't it? 'Cause isn't it typically about 5% reversion?
So we average anywhere from 3 to 5% per year.
Okay.
It's a range. However, you may recall that in 2018, the reversion was about 2.6%. It was less than our usual. So, 3%, it's not terribly conservative
Okay,
at this
yeah.
time. And what I don't have is a complete set of financial plans from the offices and departments saying where they think they're going to be at the end of this year. So 3% is the best bet at this time.
And the departments, are they required to supply a quarterly update to you?
So they are requested to
Requested.
supply.
Okay.
Requires a little strong when most of our general fund funded offices are independently elected officials. But state law mandates that the Board of County Commissioners monitor all funds and spending in every office and department in the county. I could demand it, but that wouldn't get us very far. So we work with people and say, hey, you haven't turned that in yet. Is there an issue?
Got it.
Or
But if
I
state,
just don't have them all yet.
if state law mandates that we're the overseers,
Yes,
and we're suggesting please turn it in,
yes.
what kind of compliance are we getting, or what kind
It's
of
usually
non-compliance are we
pretty good.
getting?
It just takes a while to get them all.
Okay,
But people are very good about working with us.
good, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah, they're
Thank
very good. Yeah, we rarely have a issue. Okay, so the next item on the list is building reserves, and you may recall Julie saying that she's slightly adjusting the rate for a particular project compared to what it had been. The rate for building reserves is going to go up by about $19,000. Fleet, M&O. So again, fleet is on a retrospective rate basis, which means that we look what they actually spent in 2018, and that's the amount they're going to bill out in 2020. So when they did their 2020 estimate of what they were going to spend in 2018, they were kind of low. They spent more in 18 than they thought they would. So the rate in 2020 will go up to reflect what was actually spent in 2018 by $114,000. ER&R reserves, that is the estimate of what it will cost to replace all of our vehicles, large equipment in public works, any rolling stock, if you will, and then some other equipment that we set money aside to purchase, such as vests for the sheriff. The cost for the reserves, the main driver in the increase is the cost of the sheriff's vehicles that we need to purchase, and the amount is going up by $178,000 roughly. Then we're moving, well, before we go on, or do you have any questions about the central service rates?
No, anything?
Well, I have one question, probably a minute amount, but did we, and I think this goes to your Public Works Director, did we fix the lakes rate?
Rate.
Or if you just tell me that's not gonna change, maybe we can just keep going ahead.
Jennifer Walker, Public Works Director. I don't know. I don't know if we fixed. What do you mean by we fixed?
Well, there was some dispute, and apparently more people were gonna be utilizing that space, which was gonna lessen their cost.
Are you
If-
referring
if-
to the lake management districts, the two,
Yep.
and having to do with
Yep, that moved
space
sometime back.
rates? So
Pardon?
office space
Yeah, I think that
rates?
that was part of it, yeah, office space dedicated.
Yeah, I don't know that I would characterize it as fixed. I think that they have, from my perspective, a very, very favorable allocation.
Is it going to change?
As a result of these?
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
It is my understanding that the square footage was not adjusted in facility rates for building reserves or M&O facility costs.
Yeah, I haven't seen the impacts of these yet, so.
I know it's part of Julie's work plan to take a measuring tape and go to Tilly to readjust the square footage there, but I don't believe that that's
So
reflected in this year's rates.
You don't think there'll be any change from,
I don't think that there's going to be a change in the building reserves. I don't know about the other rates, because again, the lake management districts must pay a fair share of the cost of doing business.
right, but I need to know if there's gonna be a change or not.
We can look into that and tell you.
When do you wanna vote on this issue?
I need direction today from the board.
But you can't give me an answer today on that.
On that finite level of detail, no.
Yeah, I know it's finite, but it's an issue that they feel they're not getting a fair shake, contrary to the director that does feel they're getting
I
a
do.
fair
And,
shake.
and the
Very much
budget
do.
director also feels they are
Well,
getting
I
a
think
fair
sometimes we
shake.
can agree to disagree, but
Yeah.
How much money are we talking about in difference?
Not much at all.
That's
What do you think,
I think it was reduced to less than $5,000.
It's a bit, I mean, they have a small budget, is why it becomes a big issue.
You're right.
And-
It's
and
big
as
to
you-
them, yes, I can see that.
As you may
yeah.
recall, those rates were even reduced last year to the bare minimum. But the conversation really has to be whether the county and the commissioners would like to subsidize the lake management districts. And because just eliminating all the internal services rates, that will mean that the general fund will have to subsidize.
No, I don't think we ought to eliminate. I just want to make sure it doesn't increase. That's
So,
all. That's all.
and again, you know, from my perspective, last year, as the board direction, we went through and reduced those internal services rates to the bare minimum.
Oh, since that issue
Yeah, it has been-
was raised, you reduced them
Yeah.
after that?
Yeah, we reduced those last year.
I don't recall hearing that, but. Do you remember that?
The allocation for labor hours for our aquatic resource specialist was split up amongst, they're sharing it with noxious weeds and the 2 other lake management districts. Yes, they are paying less labor hours for that position.
So
And I
is
think
this
for
due
the
to change? I guess that's, I'm wondering if it's going to change. That's all I'm asking. Are they gonna
So once we
receive
get
more
the
bill?
internal rates, then we're able to do our cost allocation. And what I would say is that I have not seen in my very short tenure here, rates and the cost of business going down.
Well,
I'm
no, I
generally
don't.
seeing it increase.
It never goes down, but
so-
I don't think they've got a fair shake myself, so I'm just curious. They have a limited budget, and they feel that overhead is eating them up, and their inability to work on water quality issues with a limited amount of money. So that's where I'm at. If you can't give me an answer, we'll just see what happens. Good, okay.
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 For now, we're okay. We'll get something later.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And also, yeah, on the ER&R briefing, you had a couple of questions related to how much a patrol vehicle costs and the increases. As Robin has stated, that's the major driver to increase the cost. In 2018, a Ford Interceptor cost $41,793. That's before taxes. And the 2020 cost for the same vehicle is $48,419. That's just about 15.8% increase. The 2018 average cost of a fully equipped patrol vehicle was $59,589. And we're projecting to the fully outfitted patrol vehicle will be at $70,000.
70?
$70,000. That will be a Tahoe Explorer, that sort of.
Now, some of that fully equipped business is if we buy a new vehicle for a new FTE versus if you buy a new vehicle and then switch equipment out.
That's brand new.
Yeah,
That's
so
also
one of those is brand new, and one of those cost estimates would be brand new. The other what would be the cost when we just switch equipment out? Because we don't buy new radios and new computers and new sirens and new
Right.
lights and all that.
I would assume that cost will be between $48,419 and $70,000.
So how many new vehicles are we buying that are going to get new equipment? I think we're only going to buy 2. I'm not sure of that, but
I think there's more than that, and the equipment's not always interchangeable.
Because some of the vehicles is not about new FTEs, it's about the replacement of all patrol vehicles. They have reached the useful life.
Right.
So it's that combination. It's not just about new staff, new sheriff deputies using new vehicles. It's that replacement of the outdated vehicles.
We fund the sheriff so that we can turn the fleet over, I believe, every 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, just about.
Is it tied to 3 to 5 years and or mileage?
So our fleet manager does an excellent job at looking at every vehicle as they prepare the projected, when do we need to replace this car?
Mm-hmm.
And they meet with the customer, in this case the sheriff, and come to an agreement car by car when they need to be replaced.
Okay.
Is mileage taken into consideration? Most likely.
Yeah. All right.
past maintenance record as well.
That's correct. And how hard is the car driven, and that all has to do when it comes to the sheriff vehicles.
But it makes sense that the 70,000 for a brand-new, fully equipped vehicle is going to be far more expensive than just taking a new vehicle and taking the old one, putting all the other junk from the old one, if it's compatible and doesn't need upgraded light bar and whatnot. It'll be
Right.
considerably less, but still a major chunk of dough.
Yep, and the cost to just do that upfit is
Yeah.
also there, whether you're buying new equipment or not.
Okay.
Okay?
Another follow-up question that you had is you requested how much square footage do we lease? And on the many different facilities, we have a total of 67,080 square feet of lease facilities that we have, for a total of 612,193 square feet of owned and leased facilities. And that was the other question that you had.
Okay.
Okay, ready to go to IT?
I am.
All right, the IT M&O, you may recall, at least two of you will recall, that when we prepared the biennial budget, this is the first time that we have split IT out of central services. And in doing that split, they did their best guess of what the cost would be, both in 2019 and 2020. So we have a little more experience at this time, and the calculations are that the IT M&O will cost $211,000 more than had been estimated for 2020.
Is that for licensing and all that type of?
It does include licenses in M&O, as well as just the staff costs of providing services. The GIS services are built into that rate. There are a number of other costs of just doing business in IT.
And that's an increase.
That is an increase, and that's the general fund share. The IT infrastructure, which is mainly the equipment like computers, servers, all of the things it takes to run our systems are in the infrastructure, and that is going down by $23,000. And then the amount of money that we're contributing to the IT system reserve is being changed just slightly to reflect additional items that the board added to the reserve last year. We overall are not increasing because we have a plan to finance some of the large system needs that we have, but this is increasing by about $12,000 at this time.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The $23,000 reduction, is that a reduction to the general fund contribution?
Yes.
And it is being picked up by non-general fund contribution?
The change in the non-general fund is essential services.
Yeah,
Here's the IT.
Yeah, question on this.
The non-general
Overall,
fund
not specifically on SIT.
is decreasing by $2,562.
So just efficiencies in both
Yay.
fund
Right,
reductions?
for what we need to buy.
Go ahead.
I'm good.
Okay?
Nope.
So these are all
Yeah,
the
we-
rate,
Oh,
Yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead, go, Robin.
Okay.
Okay, these are all of the rate adjustments that you've reviewed. You'll see on your page that there is a place for financial services, because the one internal service cost that you've not had an opportunity to review yet is the annual cost plan. And that is where Ron Haney does the calculations of how much gets distributed to other funds for costs like the commissioner's office, the HR, payroll, the financial services in the auditor's office, the treasurer's office, prosecutor's civil office. That's all distributed through something called the cost plan. Two of you may recall seeing that last year. We got a note yesterday from financial services that they're running behind on preparation of the cost plan. They won't have that ready for a few more weeks. So the cost plan creates revenue into the general fund because all of the services that I just listed are initially paid from the general fund, billed out to other funds, and then the other funds pay into the general fund. So it comes in as revenue. And what I can't tell you at this time, because I haven't seen a preview of the cost plan, is whether or not that revenue is going to go up or down. So that's the wild card here. But absent having the information from financial services, your maintenance level with rate adjustments would have the ending fund balance in 2020 at approximately $11,681,000 if you approved all of the adjustments that have been presented to you.
You said you didn't know the cost of that for sure, if it's going to go up or down. What is the potential fluctuation?
I don't have an answer for that. If you were to ask Ron, hey, what could I use for planning purposes, he'll tell you increase by 5%. That's what he tells central services. That's just, but that is based on nothing whatsoever.
Is that the way, is that the way we do business all the time there?
No, but he's working on getting a precise number. He doesn't have that yet. And
Okay, what was it last year? Or
What's the magnitude we're talking about?
I mean, about, give me a rough idea what kind of money we're talking about here.
It could swing easily by $500,000. I've seen it swing. You know, I've seen it go down $500,000. I've seen it go up by a few $100,000. It could shift, but it all depends on what each of those, because that is, again, on a retrospective basis where he is gathering up the expenses from all of those offices and the few departments that are funded from the general fund, and then allocating them out on a fair and equitable manner, and then, you know, figuring out how much revenue we've got. It is a very large amount of money.
When will we know?
In a few weeks.
He said he'll have it ready in a few weeks.
That'll be July.
But I think the underlying message is a revenue to the general fund. So
Right.
it's not an expenditure to the general fund.
No, it's a revenue, but it's a revenue that could go up or down.
Right. So, but the question is how much in revenue will come to the general fund.
Right.
And that's probably Ron Haney is going to provide you. But it's not going to be, as a result of that rate study, it's not going to be an expenditure out of the general fund.
Right. But it will affect ending fund balance.
If we have to,
Because
if
more
it's a
or less revenue.
Yeah.
With any luck, it's more. The last few years, it has come in as more revenue, and as costs go up, you know, you've increased the cost of the prosecutor's civil office, you've increased the costs in HR. That's going to result in more money coming into the general fund. One of the most important things I'd like to point out, though, as I think about it, is that on these retrospective rates, they are what they are. We spent the money last year.
It's historical.
We're just billing it out next year. So there's not a lot of room for you to say, you could say we're not going to bill it out, in which case there would just not be revenue to the general fund. and your ending fund balance would go down. You want to bill these out in a fair and equitable manner. It's in accordance with state law. It's in accordance with what the state auditor requires us to do. So these retrospective rates for the cost plan and for ER&R, they're pretty much set. You've got a little more flexibility in the prospective rates because we can talk about central services potentially reducing their costs next year, and you have a lot of flexibility in the reserve funds, but to the extent that you don't set money aside now, you're just going to have to pay later because these are costs we will eventually incur to maintain the buildings and purchase the cars and other vehicles we need. So you've got some flexibility, but not a lot when it comes to the internal services. And again, none of these are adding money. There's no new FTEs here. That would come in a policy level request. There's not a huge increase in service to their customers built into this. It's maintaining current level of service.
And as long as sales tax continues to escalate a bit revenue, then we're probably okay.
Kind of covers us, yep.
Yeah.
The 1% increase in property tax and the growth in sales tax. When we see an economic downturn, then we're going to have to talk about what to adjust, not only in internal services, but across the county.
Well, on that point, I mean, from 2018 to 19 on your graph, there's a drop in revenue of about 7 million and expenditure of about 5-ish million.
From 18 to, yeah.
What is not being spent in 2019 that was spent in 2018? I mean, why is expenditures 5 million below?
That I would have to look at. I would guess that there's I know exactly what it is. We had that revenue, the one-time revenue from the building sales that we had anticipated spending in the past that we've taken out of the budget now and used to bolster fund balance. There were also some shifts, and there was the direct appropriation to treatment sales tax and detention sales tax. So those expenditures that had started in the general fund and came in from those two funds as a revenue are now being direct charged. And that's the major reason that it's going down.
Okay, so that doesn't really reflect any. Yeah.
That's technical. It was a technical change.
Okay, so
not
we're
a
still
reduction
tracking
in spending.
along essentially.
We are.
I mean, since 2018, basically.
To cover the gap last year in the clerk's office, and we used the unemployment fund. Did that go into the general and then go over?
It went, so part of the rebate in the benefits fund went to the general fund. It bolstered up our fund balance, and the appropriation to the clerk, not related, was a decision of the board that came out of fund balance.
Okay, so that would account for some of that as well then?
A little.
Okay. Unrelated, thank you.
So taking this up even another level up, big picture, these rates were all set in the biennium budget last fall, but then this is part of our mid-year, which means next fall, or this year.
Yes,
toward the end of this year, tweaking of those rates to conform to reality based on whether it's prospective or retrospective.
We're tweaking them now, not in the fall. They come to you now because the internal services are set and put into the budget system, and then all the rest of the county determines their budget once the internal service rates are set.
Okay, but it's
So
a
this is
predicate
like
to
a
that
step one.
mid-year
Yes.
process
Yeah,
of the
this is
2
part
year,
of the mid-year process.
and we'll see this again next year. in about the same time?
Next
we
year,
prepare
we'll
for the-
look at the, yes, you'll see
Yeah.
internal service rates every year.
Once a year?
Yep,
Okay.
about this time.
So now where are we with the budget? Now what do you need?
So what I need is your approval to go ahead and distribute these rates and put them into the system, and this becomes the maintenance level. There's still a few pieces that we need to do, but this is the bulk of the maintenance level adjustments for the midterm. And what you see here is if $10 million is still the minimum, you've got a little bit of room for additional spending in the 2020 midterm adjustment at policy level, if that's what you want to do. And we'll talk more about that on Friday.
But we don't even know if that's the level anymore
Yeah,
based on the
we're
changes.
still trying to figure out if that meets cash flow.
And what I understood you to say essentially is that we technically have the ability to make tweaks to this, but I mean,
Overall, it is.
your recommendation based on the fact that those tweaks would just come back to get us at a later point, one way or the other, is to follow these rate.
My recommendation to you is to approve these rates as presented. Yes.
Need a thumbs up?
I got 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. Now we're jumping into commissioner items. And we've got professionals in the house for some of these other topics, and we have about 45 minutes.
Yes, Commissioner. I'd recommend for you to consider having a conversation on the emergency housing ordinance. I believe staff is here, your legal counsel as well. And on your packet of information is the proposed ordinance. Looks like this. And is on a bill format, which outlines the changes, proposed changes, and also reflects the modifications the board agreed last week. And the majority of the board agreed last week on those changes. So, and also you had additional questions for Travis. Travis is here, and maybe we can have going through that process, maybe try to answer some of the questions that you had.
Okay.
But this is reflected on what the majority of the board has provided in terms of the modifications based on the initial ordinance that it was published for public hearing. And unless you have any particular questions, I can walk you through the red lines. Staff is going to walk you through the red lines of that ordinance.
I have a question up front, and that is looking at the session summary, it says the firearms question will be discussed in an executive session.
Yeah, that's what probably Travis is going to advise you.
Are we going to do that now?
No.
The exec session?
No.
Okay. Wow. Table filled up, didn't it? Good grief.
That means they were
Wow.
watching the live stream.
Do we just have the one microphone, Megan, to pass around? Okay, please make certain that you speak into the microphone, okay, when you're speaking. And introduce yourselves. Let's go ahead and introduce everybody, each of you.
Joshua Cummings, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development.
Brad Murphy, Interim Manager, Community Planning.
Jeremy Davis, Operations Manager for Community Planning and Economic Development.
Just kidding.
Travis Burns, Prosecutor's Office.
Ian Lefcourt, Associate Planner, Community Planning and Economic Development.
Shelley Slaughter, Director of Thurston County Public Health and Social Services.
Okay, so you're going to start this off, or is Josh?
Yeah, staff is going to walk you through the red lines
Okay.
of the proposals. And again, we're going to concentrate on the first part. I know this ordinance has a lot of red lines, but those are same changes, but dealing with the UGAs of the cities.
Okay.
And that has not changed. Everything is the same in terms of their proposal. So walk us through the red line approach, if you don't mind. You should have that in your packet. But yeah.
Is this?
They should have that
Is
in the
this
packet.
any change from this?
Are they exact?
Should be the same.
Okay.
So,
This
yeah,
is a clean version?
no, that's the red line as well, but attached behind it is also the clean version. So just stick with what you got in your
Okay,
packets.
got it.
That'll be
Thank
just
you.
fine. And as
Okay.
the county manager said, this is the discussion on the emergency housing ordinance. And as we've had multiple briefings and discussions on this topic, this is the next step in the policy discussion, not the site operations discussion. This is the CPED, Community Planning and Economic Development portion. And this is the outcome of the last dialogue where we heard from the Board of County Commissioners to update the language that was framed as providing flexibility and tools and the discussion for the ordinance that then will lead to the operations discussion. So I want to make sure that we're very clear to separate those items again. And like we talked about, Ian will walk through the red line version of the recommendations that we heard from the Board of County Commissioners. And then also we'll just address briefly and quickly, or actually however long you'd like to address it, the discussion on the weapons and guns that the legal counsel provided as direction as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Josh. We'll start on our packet with page 3. If we recall from our discussion last week, the majority of the board approved option 3 with some modifications. The first modification is on page 3, section 2035-0905. We changed the sponsoring agency will require presentation of identification to the sponsoring agency may require presentation of identification. We've included that flexibility to ensure that the sponsoring agency does not have to require the presentation of ID. The second change is right below that at 2035-090, number 7. Again, we changed will to may. The sponsoring agency may use verifiable identification. And also upon the conclusion of our discussion, staff removed from the Thurston County Sheriff's Office. The final change is 2035-098. From the discussion about the Second Amendment issues, at this time, the draft reflects the removal of weapons from the prohibited item. So the sponsoring agency shall self-police and self-manage its residents and shall prohibit alcohol, illegal drugs, we removed weapons, fighting and abuse of any kind, littering or disturbing neighbors while located on the property. Those changes are the only changes from the option that was presented to the board last week.
Okay, just give us a minute here, Ian. Okay. Ready, keep going.
That's it.
Is that it?
That's it.
Well, you did give us a minute.
Welcome questions.
You have a question? Go ahead.
I have a quick question. So the first part, I'm good. I understand. Tracks what we said. By removing weapons, I'm trying to figure out then where that leaves us. Does that mean that because we're talking about what we can waive from a previous structure, right? So would then the sponsoring agency be able to, because it doesn't say what would be I'm not making very clear. Would the sponsoring agency have the right to, on a case-by-case basis, prohibit weapons or not? Or by removing the word as you have in 0908?
And as you're preparing your microphone, Travis, how are we defining weapons? Is it a machete?
Well, these are all good questions. Based on our, and by the way, you all are, if this is a question that is, you want to dive deeper in, I do recommend having an executive session to really just discuss why at this time I'm recommending removal of any kind of gun ban. As I read, I'm listening to your question, which is, hey, how's this being drafted? Essentially, the current language says that the sponsoring agency shall manage according to these ways, right? So it basically is a clear prohibition on weapons. We feel, based on our preliminary analysis, that the Second Amendment issues preclude a straight out bar of, basically a bar of guns. I will add that that Second Amendment protection is specific to guns, and that weapons, and there have been some jurisdictions that do prohibit, nunchucks, swords, knives, and I hate keep putting us on the loop here in terms of redrafting this thing, but it is possible to prohibit those types of weapons. It's just the removal of guns that we feel would be a prudent step at this point. So, as I read it too, and I'm getting to your other point, which is this just removes that prohibition. However, I don't read this as something that a sponsoring agency couldn't take on their own. Again, if you read up, think a little further up, every sponsoring agency shall take all reasonable and legal steps to obtain verifiable ID. There's other language here that requires them to take prudent steps to protect the encampment. So if they feel in their own independent assessment that, a prohibition on certain types of weapons is prudent, then this doesn't preclude them from doing that. It just gets rid of the prohibition that's flat out that the county would be imposing through its permitting. So, as I see it, there's still movement by removing the sort of black and white prohibition on weapons. We would still be able to fine tune through our permitting provisions or our code of conduct, that you can't bring in these other things that aren't protected by the Second Amendment. Our main concern was just a flat out prohibition would offend the Second Amendment as drafted currently if we're moving forward with implementation. That was the main concern. I can, again, get into the details of that advice, but I don't want to do it now without having further confidential conversation.
Okay.
Questions or comments?
I thought we were going to have some additional questions answered, like, I don't know, Landlord-Tenant Act, or, I didn't write down everybody's question
Do you have this?
from the other day.
Do you have this document? Because that's in your packet as well. It goes through a lot of the questions
Got
that
'em all
each of
right
us
in there.
asked. Now, it looks like this one.
Commissioners, if I may, so the questions that you had, as I remember, and the staff can probably walk you through, were more operational questions that you had in terms of how a particular site can be managed and some of the roles and responsibilities, the restrictions or not. But as I was tracking, that's not necessarily had an influence on the proposed ordinance that's before you, because that's the legislative arm of this process, and the other one is the operational component, which an interlocal agreement has to come before you anyways, before any mitigation site is approved.
Okay, I guess that brings me back to, I feel that we're getting the cart before the horse, if you will. And I'm concerned about the firearms issue, the backfill issue. If we alleviate a problem in Olympia, is it just going to fill up again with new outsiders? I want to know positively who we're dealing with. There's now been a wrench thrown in there. I don't feel we have an adequate exit plan as to what does success look like, and what are we going to do to help these people through treatment in one fashion or another, either mental health or not. So I'm not in favor of the ordinance as it is moving forward at this point in time.
Okay.
Shelley, I wanted to ask you if you raised an issue at the last work session about the sponsoring agency potentially might have state requirements that would, that would put limits on what they could and couldn't do. Do these changes, does this draft satisfy those those flexibility elements that you raised at our work session?
I believe so. Of course, legal counsel would be more appropriate to answer that specifically, but from my review of the funding and how that would tie to any entity that were to operate at a site like this, depending upon what their funding source would be, would really determine what they could and could not require. For example, if they utilized state housing funding, federal housing funding, or county administered housing funds, then they would be subject to certain requirements that we must adhere to and that the state and federal law requires under the Fair Housing Act and other various guidelines and laws that is tied to that funding. If they had other sources of funding, which some nonprofit organizations have access to private funding, faith-based organizations, they would be able to have different types of rules. But by allowing the may on here, I think that does provide enough flexibility that an operator could be found.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me. Thank you for the work on this. Tremendous effort. And I don't know if there's going to be continued as a result of this session, additional work needing to be done. However, is in 35 years in law enforcement, 30 of that being in the Thurston County and Olympia area, actually in the city of Olympia, it's been my experience that of the homeless population, that it's only about, don't quote me, it's my experience, about 2% of those folks are really severely mentally ill and or dangerous, 2 to 5%. And so it seems the vast majority of them do want assistance and do want help. And I'm not compassionate to the extent where it's blind compassion, and I want to let everybody and anybody in, but I am not willing to just turn people away and make it so tough that nobody gets in or very few get in. Especially when I've, like I said last week, spoken with veterans that are homeless and or mommies with babies. And to identify them and ask a veteran, hey, thank you for your service, but what's your zip code before I let you in? I'm compassionate with a steely eye. I want to let in people that will need it, that deserve it, that will help and benefit, but also maintain the safety in that site, wherever that site's going to be, and for the residents or businesses in the area where the site may be located in the future. So that is where I'm coming from. There's compassion with a steely eye, and then I also look at, and I brought it up last week in another session, the cost to the county by not assisting or helping folks, because the coroner, when someone dies in an encampment or a homeless person dies, the coroner's office still delivers services to the individual, and it costs money. If there's someone that's indigent and unclaimed, it's $550 to have that individual cremated, and the county pays for that, no matter where they are found in the county, in the city or not. And in many cases, he has to perform an autopsy, find out what the manner and method of death was. And that's anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400 per person to have that autopsy performed. And so year to date, just to date, we have 15 of those individuals. And so that costs several thousands of dollars. And I don't know, we can assume, presume, assign, whatever, but if by not helping folks that really need the help, may hasten to death. You never know, it's arguable both ways. I want to give people the benefit of the doubt and help them out with a steely eye. So again, I really like the work that you've done, but what really pushed me and convinced me to move off my earlier position is when legal said, and when our risk management folks said, the best option and is the one that provides the county the most flexibility is the one we're looking at. And so I'm ready to take this on as the option. Still, as I said last week, I just need further evaluation in an executive session regarding those specific issues. But I'm satisfied we're doing the best that we can for everybody on the camp, outside of camp, but policy-wise, the best. I think this is the best policy we can come up with. Yes, sir.
have any additional questions.
No, I'm not satisfied.
So
with
in
these
terms of the
views.
process, you have this item to take a formal action next week, Tuesday afternoon during our board session. The question that I have is for you, is this proposal, this is what captures your comments in the discussion that you've had in the past couple of weeks?
Yes and no. I say no because we haven't had the executive session yet. But yes, as it stands,
So
yes.
the next question that I would like to ask the board is, would you like to hold taking a formal action next week until you have that executive session related to the weapons and firearms?
I do.
No,
I do.
I do not want to wait.
Well, we could have the executive session today, yes?
We're not scheduled to have an executive session today, but you could have one.
I'd like to have one, but I don't want to take this off the agenda for next week.
So if that is the case, if you can recommend revising the agenda, there's other items on the agenda, I can move those to next week. There's not an urgency for you to deal with those items the rest of this morning. And you can probably call an executive session if you like to globalize the conversation.
Well, let me ask my seatmates, because either we pull this and then have the executive session and it comes back, or we revise and do the executive session and keep it on the agenda for next week. Is that what I'm hearing?
My suggestion is if you'd like to have the executive session today, I can give you the RCW in which allows you to have that executive session. You announced it, and then some of the staff may remain to have that conversation with you. And after that executive session, then you will be in the I will ask you the same question.
Okay.
If you would like to continue, if the board, the majority or not, would like to continue to have this item on next week's agenda.
Okay, so let me ask my seatmates. You want to do an executive session on this now?
Sure, I mean, it's okay with me.
There's 3 hours on tomorrow's schedule it says hold for board work session. Is there a reason we can't do it tomorrow so we can finish the rest of today's agenda?
We could, but I think maybe you have individual appointments on your calendars. Perhaps there might be conflict on that.
What time is that?
Well, my calendar says 9 to 11, hold for board work sessions, and 2 to 3, hold for board work sessions. So I haven't scheduled anything in those slots, thinking that we might be having a board work session.
Yeah, and I'm available 9 to 11 tomorrow morning.
Okay.
I'd help you with that, but I'm not sure I'm legal. I can.
I'm good. Good in the morning.
So then I
Start
will
at 7
schedule
if
an
you want.
executive session tomorrow for 30 minutes.
Okay.
And,
Are you available?
I just realized I'm in a conference in Cheyenne.
Uh-oh.
I should check my calendar before
Maybe the items remaining on today's agenda are not critical.
Right.
I can move those items for discussion next week, for next Tuesday morning. So you do have time in the next 30 minutes to have an executive session if you wish.
Okay. Then I said let's just do that.
Okay.
Let's do it now.
That's fine.
Okay, find me the RCW to keep us legal.
Is RCW 4230-1101I.
4230-110. 1I. Got it.
And that will be for the next 30 minutes, Commissioner.
Okay.
I really wanted to talk about SWAC, but you guys.
All right, thank you. We're going into an executive session now, so kill
So
the mics.
I will probably recommend to have Josh, Travis, Shelley.
But action may, when we come back, action may follow.
Yeah.
As
You
well.
cannot take an action in executive session.
Right.